colleges going again test optional, a lot of them have added additional essay questions. Okay, and the essay questions, which are typically called supplements, in addition to the main essay, are really key and important. And by the way, what I tell my students all the time is anything that is specific from the college as a question, essay question, that says optional, optional is not optional. You should absolutely respond to it, with the exception of one thing that I'm going to show you that's more application focused, not college specific. But if it's a college specific question, you should absolutely make sure you answer every single essay question that they have, including the optional ones. We have to achieve your college admission goals through strong essays. To me, that could be the differentiator. I can't tell you how many times my students write to me and tell me how excited they are about the fact that an admissions person actually wrote a handwritten note about how much they love their essay. That's the goal. And also there is an optional COVID essay at this point, which you may have heard about. So this was where I might sound like I'm contradicting myself, but just to be clear, optional is optional relative to this question, but it's not optional when it's a college specific supplemental essay question. So when we talk about the optional COVID essay, the goal of this essay, if you read it, is not for you to share the fact that testing has been canceled, prom has been canceled, you weren't able to participate in a summer program because it was canceled, you haven't been able to see a lot of schools. All those things are very, very real things. And please understand, I'm not trying to trivialize any of those, because I'm there right with you with my students, but also with my own daughter. So I'm with you on all that. But really the goal of this COVID optional essay is for you to share if you've been significantly impacted. And I hope that all of you haven't. But if there's a loss of income, if God forbid you had a loss of a loved one, if illness hit your family, if you weren't able to connect for some reason due to technological issues, things of those types of things. That's what you're supposed to cover here. Because writing about other cancellations or things that a lot of us have experienced, as far as not being able to go away, not being able to experience a program, not being able to participate in an internship, those are terrible. And I understand that. And again, I'm not trying to make light of those, but so many other people have been affected as well. If you fill it out with that kind of notion, it might come across as you lacking the sensitivity, but also the awareness of what is going on in this country and the world as far as this pandemic is concerned.
So Russ, before we go to the next slide, just a few questions. Maybe I'll just sum them up. And they're related to, you started talking about test scores. What if a student what if they were lucky enough to take the test? Should they still submit it? And what if they have practice tests?
Yeah. So, okay. So as you know, it's so funny, Debbie, because you and I were just talking about this literally before we came on. We could actually do a whole session on the standardized testing aspect of things, and that's really not the focus of today. But the short, and again, I can't give you the blanket answer because it depends on so many things. Depends on the types of schools your child's applying to, depends if the schools that we're talking about are a reach, match, safety. There's a lot of different things relative to that. The bonus is if your child has already taken a test and it's a good score for the schools that they're applying to, I would absolutely obviously submit it. And I have to think that's going to put you ahead of the curve relative to admissions versus people who don't have it. The other stuff, Debbie, honestly, is so involved that I could spend an hour talking about that. So I don't really feel comfortable because I don't want to give guidance that somebody walks away with thinking that it applies to everything, because that's a really specific question.
Okay, just one other is not about test scores. One other question that somebody's asking, which I think might be good to just talk about whether it's an appropriate, answer to the COVID question is, let me see, sorry, I lost it for a second.
Probably if they did something significant during COVID, right?
Well, yes. So this question was, what if they ended up making masks?
Yeah, so I mean, I think if you have something significant that your child has done to try to help the cause, to try to participate, to try to help, the critical workers, essential workers, if there's things like that, It's definitely something you can do, but the wording of that also, you need to be careful. You don't want it to be like braggadocious in its tone and its content. So, you know, you want to establish why it was important for them to contribute, and you can do something like that. But again, it should be something that you feel is significant. The goal, again, the goal of this optional essay, as I understand it, as explained to me by the people at the Common App organization, was colleges don't want to receive every single person responding to this saying, I wasn't able to test, I wasn't able to do this, I wasn't able to do that, or, you know, during this time I learned a lot about myself, I learned how to be autonomous. They don't want to hear that. Okay. If it's something though that is significant, like making masks, like that is a direct contribution to your community to help them in this type of a situation, to help financially, medically, community service, mental health wise, whatever. If it's something that's really outstanding in that capacity, I would be a lot less apprehensive to put that in, and I would probably give it a shot.
Okay, and this is last, and we'll go to the next slide. So, and this is also kind of related to the topic of COVID. Somebody is asking, aren't a lot of people going to talk about how COVID or the pandemic changed them? Are they going to talk about that in their personal essay? And isn't that going to be a bore for the admissions people to read? So
I don't doubt that a lot of people are going to do that. However, I can assure you none of my clients are going to do that. So I would absolutely 100% stay away from the pandemic, COVID, any of these things on a main essay, unless you're specifically asked. I would definitely stay away because, again, Debbie, we both are part of different organizations for our business, for our industry. And I'm sure you saw, like I did, as soon as they came out with what was going on, there were all these memes going out, not to be insensitive, in the admissions world saying, me after reading my 900th essay of the day on COVID, so they definitely don't want that.
Okay.
Okay, so this is going to sound really obvious, but I'm actually going to give you an example of one of the essays I'm going to review where a student is writing and having some really nice things that they write, but not answering the prompt. And when you answer the prompt, you have to answer the prompt in its entirety. So this applies both to the Common App, personal statement, big essay, main essay, whatever you want to call it, but it also applies to supplemental essays, those additional college-specific essays and questions that the college asks. So when you read something, you should be writing down as a student to whatever your responses are of the question in its entirety. Make sure you're answering it completely. If it's 3 points, you have to answer all 3 points. If it's 2, answer 2. But answer what they're specifically asking. Don't go on tangents. Did you provide enough details? You've probably heard this before. And I just had a conversation before this. I just ended a meeting with a client, and it was a boy, male student of mine. And I said, look, you got some great stuff and you make some great claims, but you are telling them, you're not showing them. And there's a big difference. A lot of people are going to say that they're disciplined, they're empathetic, they're caring, they're involved. But that's great. But you have to make sure that you are showing that. You're showing that through example. You're showing through that through your mindset and how you think about things and how you approach things. It's a very different essay than what you might expect to be writing in an English class. You have to provide details and backup, but it's also details and backup about you, the student, not about a thing or an activity or an event that takes up 600 words, and then you try to squeeze something in about the student at the end for the last 50. And then also, is your response cliche? What I say by cliche is try not to talk about, especially if you're a boy, sports. Now that's their favorite thing to write about, favorite thing to do. And I get that. If you're a female, dance. It's very stereotypical and cliche type of response. And if you feel strongly enough that you want to write about something like that, what I always advise my clients to do is you don't let them know what the main topic of your essay is in the intro. Because the second they read sports, football, soccer, dance, whatever, they're going to go another sports essay. And they're going to scan it or maybe not read it at all. So to me, there's ways to do it and ways to kind of set up your essay. So you could be writing about a cliche topic, but you hold it and you hold their interest with them not knowing, and you kind of reveal it in a special, different way that they're not resentful of the fact that you have a cliche topic. Review your essays. Okay, really, it sounds obvious, but this is not only as you finally copy and paste or cut and paste into the Common App, but it's also when you're going through. I edit my essays with my students multiple times. The first interaction we have, I tell them, write anything, write as much as you want. Don't worry about tone. Don't worry about it. Is it good enough? Don't worry about it. Just write. Do whatever you need to do to get it from here to the computer and show it to me. So that way I can see it. So that way I can understand what's important to you, because I will find something. Okay. But write and write and write. But as you go through things and as you start editing and polishing and getting better, structure and content, you have to make sure that your response matches the question. You have to make sure that it reflects positively about you. And honestly, it's the next one sounds like it's so obvious, but it's funny. And I don't know if they changed it this year yet, but in the past, if it says the max is 250 words and you copy and paste something and it's 253, you might be thinking, I got it in. No, it says right on there, 253 out of 250. And not being able to follow instructions is critical, okay? So you never, ever, ever, even if the Common App or other application allows you and takes the additional words, you never, ever, ever want to exceed the word limit of essays. But in addition, you don't want it too short. However, too short is subjective. Do not, in my opinion, do not put extra filler in there just for more words if it ruins the authenticity of the message and it ends up going on a tangent or ends up being repetitive. And then grammar. So a lot of people talk about grammar, and listen, it is important. You do not want fragments. You do not want run-on sentences. You do not want tenses to not match. I get all that. I think personally, if you send whatever the final product is through something like Grammarly, you're good. Okay, read it out loud, make sure it makes sense, make sure everything sounds good, but don't go crazy with the grammar, because honestly, if there's absolutely no grammar mistake and it sounds it's the thesaurus, to use words that aren't like normal speak for the student and not in their voice, they're going to know it's not authentic, and they're going to know that they got outside help. Just so you know, most colleges know, whether it's an English class, outside help, mom and dad, that students do get usually some type of assistance and guidance. So they expect that this essay is going to be better grammatically and otherwise than like an SAT or ACT essay, okay? However, going overboard with that is definitely a red flag that the student may not have been as involved as they should have been in writing it.
Okay, before we go to the next slide, this is a few interesting questions, and maybe this tags to the slide before, but somebody's asking, what if you're actually part of an unusual sport like synchronized swimming? So does that still fall into the no sports, essay category?
The answer is it depends. I mean, and listen, by the way, it's not just sports, right? So I have students, there are other quote unquote cliche topics, okay? And I'm going to mention some of them, and some of you will be like, "Are you kidding me?" But I'm just telling you, okay? So, camp, very cliche topic. Also, believe it or not, loss of a loved one is a lot of times a topic that a lot of people, a lot of admissions people feel is an overused topic. Now, I worked with families and still do, of families affected by 9/11. That's a big part of their life. Of course they want to write about that, and of course we do. So it's not across the board that you can't, but you just have to be sure what your message is if you use a cliche topic. So something like synchronized swimming, yes, is unique, but I don't know if I'd want to talk about the sport of it. I want to talk about the creativity maybe of it, and I'd want to talk about whatever other unique characteristics or personality traits or that your student has acquired as a result of it.
I'm sure what you just said also applies to somebody who wrote like Eagle Scout. I know that comes up a lot too.
It
I don't,
does.
yeah.
It does. And listen, look, I know like Eagle Scout, bronze, silver, gold awards for Girl Scouts. I mean, I know like that's a lot of hours and it's a big part of their life. I get it and I understand it. But what I usually do with those types of topics is I actually try to find a way to incorporate it and drop it in like a paragraph, but not write the whole essay about that.
So Russ, and maybe I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but somebody's asking, so can you give an example of what is not a cliche topic?
Well, so again, so if you look at, and I have a brainstorming sheets that, 6 pages of questions that I have students write about, right? So what I do is I try to let people talk about anything. Like I want something unique to them. What I say to a lot of my clients who aren't sure what to write, I say, okay, envision I had 5 of your best friends in the room with us right now. And I said, tell me what your first impression is or the first thing that comes to mind when you think about Ashley. And they share that, and we usually were able to come up with something. It could be something in their room. It could be a collection. It could be a hobby. I had a girl write about a special coffee drink that she made at Dunkin' Donuts that became, the Lindsay, that all of a sudden everybody in her morning group, coffee group was ordering a Lindsay. So there's even mundane things, but mundane things that are specific to the student, but then will allow you to elaborate on how you think, feel, what's important to you, and how to, ideally, and I love when colleges do this, a lot of times, it's one of my favorite parts, is when an admissions person gets in front of a group and talks about the essay and says, hey, if we found your essay without your name on it in the middle of the floor, I want to be able to read it and say, this is Debbie. So that talks about, it can't be a cliche or something that you could replace any other person or any other name. It's got to be what the person wears, what the person likes, how they feel, music they listen to, drinks they drink, friend groups, whatever. It's how they spend their free time. There's a lot of different things to do that. And sometimes people think that it could be a made up thing. I'll give you an example. And again, it's in the essay helper, which we'll talk about later, but I have sample essays that I use that are completely made up things from the student, and made up not meaning that they're fabricated, not real, but they're things that my student has actually created in their routine or about themselves. Nobody else has those things, but they use that to describe themselves. So there are really a lot of things. The activities, the academic interests and all that, you should have plenty of room to discuss that and share that in the supplemental essays. The Common App essay is not an English paper. It is something to talk about something that's ideally not on the activity list and not on their transcript.
Okay, well, you've been talking about this, but.
Yes, so I think I talked about a bunch of this, but one of the things I will say in this part is repetitiveness. I find a lot of students initially will say something and then they kind of say the same thing, but they say it in a little bit different way. And it's really important to try to have different message to make sure that you are not talking about the same thing, just in a different way. In addition, a lot of students, I actually start my essays with my clients in May of their junior year. And the reason I do that is because I have found over the years, this is honestly, for a lot of them, one of the most difficult things that they will ever write, because it's about them. So they are very comfortable writing about things, writing about the event, writing about the person, writing about the sport. But when it comes down to the introspection of them and who they are, they struggle a lot of times with that. They sound like they're bragging, but also a lot of times they don't want to write stuff and get criticized, because then it might criticize who they are as a person. And you as a parent probably are painfully aware of that. Even though you have nothing but good intentions, you read an essay, you give feedback, and your student storms out of the room because they think you're criticizing not their writing, but you're criticizing them as a person because it's about them, right? So it's a very touch and go kind of situation, but you got to try to get them away from their comfort level and try to get them to really write as much as they can about themselves.
Okay, I'm going to ask you this question, but then, and while you're telling it, I'm going to switch and share the essays that you picked to kind of walk through.
Great.
Perfect. Okay. So somebody, maybe you can elaborate if you have a few of these, is asking, what are some good questions to ask your friends that, you know, about who you are to maybe give you some ideas for your essay?
Yeah, so I mean, first off, I saw something in here about you're not supposed to use I. I think somebody typed that in. I'm going to just tell you, there are no rules when it comes to the Common App main essay. It could be in third person, first person. It's a creative writing. So stop with the anecdote need, stop it all. That's why I always say it's not an English essay. And you love your English teacher, and I'm sure your English teacher is great. And I like a lot of English teachers too. But the thing is, a lot of them look for grammar and say they go a traditional way of a 5-paragraph essay. You don't want to do that. This is something where you literally can write about anything you want in any format you want, as long as it's a positive message, it's clear what you're answering and what the information you're providing.
Remember what the essay choices were?
Now, getting back to the other question, Debbie, is I use it as an open question. I would say just that. When you think of me, what do you think? What's the first thing you think of? Like, I had a student do that with her best friend and her peach Snapple. She's like, wait, what? She goes, yeah, you always have a peach Snapple in your hand all the time, and you're always talking to us about trying to guess what the topic is on the cap. She wrote a whole essay about that. So you can definitely ask about that, or you can also say, hey, you know, in our friend group, what role do you see me playing? You can ask, you know, anything, you know, if you think about an article of clothing with me, what is it that you wear? What am I known for? Like, I had a kid who wore shorts to school every single day. Didn't matter. And again, we're in New Jersey, so it didn't matter if it was 7 degrees out, he wore shorts. He wrote about that. So it could be, again, it doesn't have to be something significant. Again, a lot of these students, a lot of these kids are trying so much. They're like, I don't have anything good to write about. I don't have anything significant. Nothing bad has happened to me. I'm like, whoa, hold on. It's good that nothing bad has happened to you. You don't need something bad. Shit, what makes you unique as a person? Why do your friends love you? Why does your mother love you? Find out. Everybody has people that love them. Find out. That's what I would do.
Okay. Can you see this essay?
Yes, okay. I can. Hopefully everybody else can too. So I went through a bunch of essays that were submitted, and I picked a couple, not, by the way, to rip them apart or anything. I'm not going to do that. I picked them because I thought they were examples of certain things that we've already discussed. So it's a little long. I'll try to read most of it because I'd like you to hear it, and I want you to think about whether or not you think, you know, what you think is positive and what you think needs to be changed or altered about the essay. So this one, I'm assuming most of you know, there's several prompts with the Common App, and this one, they're answering this question. And bottom line is, you have to explain the significance to you and what steps you took or can be taken to identify a solution to an intellectual challenge, a research query, or an ethical dilemma, or anything that's of importance to you. Okay? So, Pulse nightclub shooting, Parkland massacre, Boston Marathon bombing, Haitian earthquake, Hurricane Maria, tragedy, loss, bereavement. Okay, now, a couple things with that. Does get your attention. I'm not sure if it's good attention, but does get your attention, right? And a lot of fragments, but it works. It's okay. It gets your attention. You're kind of curious, like, where are you going with this, right? And above all, the epitome of human distress. Trauma runs rampant in society and evokes a sense of determination to advocate for further change. I see this drive in the eyes of news journalists. Journalism remains an indispensable component of society. I look to journalists in times of utter despair to keep me informed, secure, and sane. An array of journalists are deeply committed to uncovering the truth and representing it to the public. And yet the majority of their contributions and significance to various media platforms is overshadowed by a crippling mental health crisis. This escalating mental health phenomenon impacts over 85% of journalists nationwide, according to USA Today. However, this dire situation is rarely, if ever, discussed and brought to the topic of conversation. And when I conducted my own research, I discovered that a limited number of, I'm sorry, the waiting room person came in. Okay, studies exist with regard to showcasing just how detrimental journalists' daily tasks can be taken to their well-being. I want to focus my efforts on researching the mental health of journalists and reporters during my junior year of high school. I've had a passion for news journalism ever since I was young. When getting ready for school, I was in awe of how animated and vivacious the characters of the Today Show were. I'm not sure they still are, but I don't even watch that. Do you watch that, Deb? I don't even know.
Not anymore. I used to growing up.
I know, we don't have time anymore.
Right.
I asked myself, how can people be so giddy in the morning? I still haven't answered that question, but it was right there and then that I decided to pursue the art of communications and ultimately become a news journalist reporter of the future. Flash forward to the beginning of my junior year, my sophomore English teacher persuaded me to enroll in independent study. The unique aspect of IRS was the lack of a concrete curriculum. I had the liberty to choose my own research question and topic to which I would devote the entire year of generating solutions, performing meaningful research, and cultivating a mass media project to solidify my findings. I seized this opportunity to formulate a research question revolving around the mental health of news journalists nationwide. What occurs behind the camera is nearly as important as what is presented in front of the camera. Conducting my own research was foreign to me. There was no manual to guide me on how to obtain statistics, factual details about the topic that was barely addressed in the public arena. I reached out to several credible news professionals who assisted me on my journey. These individuals were willing to be questioned about the brutal activities of their occupation. In total, I interviewed 10 journalists and multimedia reporters. I eliminated external bias by accounting for gender, age, field. To say that these interviews altered my outlook of life was be an understatement. My perspective was revolutionized in such a manner that I felt physically ill just thinking about how I over-dramatized my own problems. These complete strangers illustrated in grave detail how they witnessed such gruesome and heart-wrenching events on a daily basis, while I complained about a 92 I got received on a U.S. history test just 30 minutes before. I felt ignorant. I felt insensitive. There are individuals in the world with actual problems, and here I was pondering over an above average test grade. What's wrong with this picture? I realized that over-dramatizing my problem was not an effective way of living my life. Instead, I decided to view my personal challenges as learning opportunities. I wanted to mature and grow from my experiences and manifest my philosophy to others to spread more awareness about the unvarnished realities of our world. I plan to advocate for the expansion of greater programming initiatives to include all news reporters and journalists in the field. Through this, I passionately believe that I can solve this newsroom epidemic and grant justice to all journalists nationwide. Whew. Okay. So I'm just curious. And Debbie, do you have the chat open? I think you do, right?
I do, yes.
So I'm just curious, and that's a lot to take in, I understand, but if you could, Debbie, could you go back up to the question itself?
Yep.
So everybody can see it? I'm curious, what are your thoughts on this? Good essay? Not a good essay? What do you think? Positive and negative?
Anybody? You can unmute yourself or, okay. Coming fast. Did not answer the question. First paragraph's too long. It doesn't speak to the person. Somebody thought it was a great essay. I lost track, hard to follow. The essay is a little mediocre. Hook was good, but was too much telling and not showing.
Good.
Essay.
Okay, so let's stop there. So in general, I see a bunch of you writing that you didn't answer the question. You're exactly right. The biggest problem with this essay is it doesn't answer the question. She's absolutely explained what is important to her, but what steps—
We don't even know it's a her, so.
what steps I thought she said, so if it's
okay,
not,
maybe.
my bad. But explain the significance to what steps you took or could be taken to identify the solution. That we didn't answer that at all. A couple of you I saw wrote that it's deep. You're right. It's deep. It's a little bit negative, right? Now, I'm going to tell you though, if you could go down to the bottom, the last paragraph, please.
Yep. Oops, sorry. I don't know what happened. I have to get out of this, sorry.
No worries.
Uh-huh.
This is what I love about it. Okay, right here. And this is what happens a lot of times, folks. A lot of times students will write about something, and it's not until the last paragraph that you get the real meat. Now I'm finding out about her being empathetic, the realization that she's come to. What she wants to do, she wants to manifest and grow and change her philosophy. She wants to have an impact. This is now where you're finally learning something about the student. Now, that's not to say that this essay is a poorly written essay. It's not, okay? But I have to wait till the end. I don't know that I'm gonna get to the end if I have 50 other essays I gotta do today. The other thing is what she's talking about or he's talking about in here as their communication interest, honestly, could be saved for a supplemental essay of why you want to pursue XYZ major. If you write this as a Common App essay that every single school gets, when you're asked why you want to pursue your chosen major, which obviously for this person is going to be communications, what do you have left to write about? So it's not that it's a bad essay. It's not. It's not. There's some things in here that I really like the way this person wrote it. However, it's not answering the question. You're not learning enough about why this is so important. Even from, you talk about a class that you took that you spent a whole year doing. Well, what did you do in the class? She or he said and told, but didn't show. Didn't give details to show the detail of what they've done, the depth of what they've done. So again, this is not a bad essay. And I like some of the things that were written there, but this is a mistake a lot of parents do. A lot of students do, is they wait till the very end to give you the meat. And a lot of times I take the end and move it to the beginning, and that's when we start.
It's a very good point you made, Russ, too, about kind of looking at all the essays you have to write and kind of deciding, you know, if you, as you said, if this student writes about their interest in communications in this essay, then they don't have anything else to write for the other essay that they're going to be asked to write.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, but most students don't, because first off, again, if you're starting in May, you don't even know what the other essays you have to write until at the minimum of August 1st, right? But Debbie, if you follow my guidelines and what I've tried to say to make it so personal and about you, non-academic, not about your transcript, not necessarily a regurgitation of your activities, then you don't run into that problem at all. And I'll tell you, and my daughter told me that you need to make sure you tell them this, Dad, because you say this all the time, and it's true. One of my favorite essays that's in the Essay Helper is something called The Cosmopolitan. And this was a student of mine who I had a very good relationship with, which I have a very good relationship with most, but this was a very good relationship, above and beyond, very close, joking. I knew her really well. And she came in, and I told you how I do it, write about anything, as much as you want, all that. She wrote 3 pages. And she came into my office, she threw it across the desk, and she said, read it. And she leaned back, and she watched me read it. I read it, and she said, what do you think? I said, honestly? She said, yes, honestly. I said, it's terrible. Now, I wouldn't say that to everybody, right? But I knew her, as I said, very well, and I knew she could handle it. She said, no, I'm serious. What'd you mean? What'd you think? I said, no, terrible. And she goes, wait, what do you mean? Isn't it well written? I said, yes. She goes, isn't it like something that is long enough to answer the prompt? I said, maybe. She goes, then what didn't you like? I said, it's boring. It doesn't say anything about you. She said, wait a second. You didn't like any of it? I said, no, I liked 2 sentences. She said, 2 sentences out of 3 pages? I said, yes. She's like, which 2? I said, you referred to yourself as a cosmopolitan. Tell me more about that. And that's what her whole essay became. So whatever your student writes, and in this circumstance, what I would be doing here is I would be focusing, I would save all the stuff above the last paragraph for a why this major essay. And I would be drilling in and focusing in on these last 6, 7 sentences, and I would try to get behind the scenes. how this person thinks, feels, and what they want in their life, to the impact they want to have, what makes them the ways that they're describing. And I promise you, I would unearth something much more engaging, much more personal, and much more unique that we would write about. Any other questions on this, Deb, that's significant that you want me to?
No, like this person, Kaylee, wrote this. I thought this is maybe a nice way of kind of summing up what you're saying. She wrote, what in you pulled you to the things you like, not what you actually like about them.
True. Yes, that's a good way to say it. Absolutely. And listen, again, like all of us, some of us are better writers than others as adults, never mind students and kids, right? Some kids can't stand to write. Some kids love to write. I would say a majority of the kids that I work with initially say they're dreading this essay. They don't want to do it. They don't know what to write about. They have nothing exciting. It's a lack of confidence, to be honest with you. But again, everybody has something. And what I try to aim for, and I talk to my students, and what you as parents, hopefully you can do with your student, is when they hit that submit button, they should feel good about what they wrote. They should feel like I am putting my best foot forward and there's no regrets. I didn't settle and I like what I submitted. That's the goal. And it does take some time.
Okay. So we have one other essay.
So we'll just one other essay, then we'll close up. But this is important because I want people to understand these are the types of things that we get all the time. And it's, again, not that they're poorly written. It's just that they don't necessarily, it's not the ideal topic sometimes. And a lot of times they don't answer the question. I don't know what prompt this person was responding to because they didn't include it. I have an idea, but I can't use that part. This one, Debbie, I do know is a boy because he refers to himself.
Okay.
And maybe that's why I just assumed the other one was a female. But anyway, I figured we'd do it even Steven. From the time I was born, I faced multiple challenges. As I was premature by more than a month, I had a lot to overcome between health and social issues. I was almost 2 years old and had still not begun to talk. So the doctor suggested I begin something where I could be around other children since I was babysat by my grandmother. Being born into a family that has gymnastics experience, what better way for me to be around others than for me to take my own classes? In time, I began to talk, but I never knew that these classes I started to take at the age of 2 would impact me for the rest of my life. 4 years passed and I joined the competitive team. I fell in love with the sport without even realizing the life lessons I would gain throughout my journey. My first couple of years of the team exposed me to other kids my own age, and in a few years, I practiced with teammates several years older than me. I never regretted this as they taught me how to interact with others who are older and to be able to recognize similarity despite age differences. Thank you, Debbie. During this time, I also played on a travel soccer team as well as my school team. Being a competitive athlete, hours of time are put into practice, competitions, and games. Additionally, a kid always wants time for friends and family. This is where my most valuable lesson was learned, this being time management. Throughout my career as a gymnast, soccer player, and being very studious in my academics, this need to balance everything has guided me to a path of success. I truly believe I would not be as successful as I am today if I did not figure this out early on in my life. I have carried this skill over from sports into my school life, where I am constantly balancing hours of homework and study time. Gymnastics is one of the most grueling and challenging sports in the world. It takes hard work and dedication to push through the pain and to have the grit to persevere when you fail hundreds of times. The physical and mental requirements of the sport are taxing. This dedication definitely transferred into my everyday life, whether this be in school, sports, etc. The perseverance I have learned has allowed me to be successful in multiple areas which may not have happened had I given up every time I failed. Last but not least, it came to the moment when I was the oldest member of the team for the first time. I had to learn how to lead. I never practiced with anyone younger than me before, but now I was faced with the challenge of how to become a leader for the ones who are suddenly looking up to me instead of vice versa. I made it a goal in school to always be a leader for my classmates in projects and virtually any situation. However, this was different. I had to now be a role model for the younger boys on the team. This is how I knew boys, right? See? Okay. So, in addition, my coach demonstrated how I was to teach the younger boys, providing my feedback to them so they could receive multiple insights on skills they are attempting. If you wouldn't mind, I can't see the bottom part, Deb.
Oh.
Gymnastics has taught me lessons, thank you, that I would never have gained otherwise. To this day, I hold true to the multiple values I've acquired from this sport: time management, leadership, socialization, hard work, dedication, and confidence, to name a few. Now approaching my senior year of high school, I will utilize everything I've acquired and apply it to the very abnormal and challenging year to come, and carry this experience with me into my college career. Ultimately, whatever environment I'm in, I hope to make it a better place. So I'm curious, not knowing if they answered the question, let's just assume they have. If a couple people could give me your feedback on that.
Too cliche. I like it. Sports. So many coming so fast. Basic, dry, loved it. Very basic, but not really saying anything. I like how the sports essay revealed in the true topic, all over the place. Nice story, but very simple sentences. Sounds like a standard test answer, not specific, repetitive, good ending.
Good. And on, right? So, okay. So this is another example of an essay that, by the way, is not poorly written. There's a lot of content in here that I would go crazy with if he were my client. There's a lot of things we can work with here. Absolutely. However, you're absolutely right. And this was the giveaway, right? It is a cliche topic because it is about sports. However, one of the greatest challenges with a sports like gymnastics is that you are solo every event you perform. And like he said, you have to deal with failure. You fail at practice. You fail in competitions. You fail on a regular basis. So learning to deal with failure, to accept that and actually learn from that, is a huge life lesson. One of the things I would focus on is that failure part, the pressure that he feels, what goes on in his mind, what he thinks about as he's getting ready for an event to perform. What he's learned from years and years of tough coaching, but also not accomplishing, making a mistake. People are afraid to write about mistakes. Mistakes are how we learn. We as adults know that, and even we don't want to talk about mistakes. We want to avoid them most of the time. But to me, that's got a great potential there. Not leading with the sport. I would actually do a description of an event that he's going to get onto. And the thought process, it's called the stream of consciousness start. So the person reading it is instantly engaged, doesn't even know what the heck the person's talking about yet, but wants to read more. I think there's a lot of potential with this essay, just not the way he wrote it. Now, the other thing is, and I know he had no bad intention with this, but when you talk about the trouble of balancing schoolwork and a tough curriculum and achieving such great success, like those, you got to be very careful. I don't doubt that all that's true for this person, but you have to be careful making those claims because you want the college to feel that way. You don't want to tell them how to think and feel about it. And if you are truly accomplished, you shouldn't have to tell them that you are. In addition, lots of kids, lots of families, lots of people are very torn between all the things that are going on in their life. And by the way, when you go to college, if you can't handle it now, how are you going to handle it in college? Now, he didn't say you can't handle it, but if you're kind of insinuating that you're kind of pushing it to the max and you're not sure you can handle more, that would leave maybe some doubt that maybe this person isn't college ready. Am I overthinking this, folks? You might say yes, but what do you think a college admissions person is going to do? That's the kind of thing you need to protect your student against, because I and you get to know your student well because we care, because we have more time with them. This is a stranger getting a submission who does not know your child, at least not well, and this is their first impression. It can't be filled with doubt.
Okay. I'm just seeing any other comments.
By the way, also, just to mention, the ending part here about very abnormal and challenging year to come, there's nothing wrong with that. That shows awareness. That shows that he has been affected by this, but he's not complaining about it. He's not whining about it. He's not, looking for empathy about it, but it's showing that he has been affected or impacted in some way without making it all about that. It shows he's present in the time. So I actually like that reference. I think it's a very safe reference and effective to use.
What about the beginning when he talked about being premature?
Yeah, I have to tell you, my own daughter's a preemie. I was a preemie. I think there's a lot to say about that. I expected it to go in a different.
Right.
I think there's a great potential there. And honestly, you could write about that and then include gymnastics as not the whole theme, but to show that from the very beginning, man, I had to fight the second I was born, man. And it's what I'm about. And by the way, and I don't know, like there's nothing about the size of this person. Maybe the person is not as tall or big or whatever as a result. Like, so fighting, like this person's a fighter. This one's a doer. That's like, give me something and I'm going to get it done. Like there's so much other great stuff to talk about potentially. But yeah, Deb, I loved that at first. I was like, oh, here we go. And then I was disappointed because then we went to a sport thing.
Right. I agree. It didn't kind of match the rest of it.
Right.
So there was a question earlier, not necessarily related to this essay, but in general, let me see if I can pull it back, but maybe I'll just summarize it about, there's the essay that says like, write about anything you want.
Yes.
Kind of, I'm paraphrasing. And the person was asking, is that really okay to choose that essay, or do admissions officers prefer you choose kind of one of the other more specific prompts?
Yeah, so that's a great question. In the past, and again, most of you don't necessarily care or aren't aware of the past, right? So, but in the past, there used to be a topic of choice, they used to call it. That's all they did, it just said topic of choice. And that was the most popular topic, but that's because the other topics, and at the time there were only 5, they were not, they were either very deep or not something that most kids would write about. So 68%, I think, was the number of people wrote of topic of choice. I feel with this new revamped, which is kind of the same over the last 4 years, but it is different and new than it was before that, of having now 7, 8 topics. I actually prefer to try to pick an actual topic to write about. And I also think that your catch-all, if you're not sure, is essay topic number 1. Something about your background, your identity, that your application would just not be complete without. I think that's where you default to if none of the other topics resonate. I prefer to stay away from the topic of choice because I like to have a theme, a direction, and I want to make it something very, again, personal. So it's not that it's a bad choice. I just try to stay away from that given the other choices.
Okay, I'm going to switch back to the slides. Can you see the slides now?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
You're doing a heck of a job with this, Deb. I got to tell you.
Yeah.
We're on to the next slide.
Okay, hold on. Oh, that was the sample essays reviewed. Okay.
Okay, good. So a couple things to remember. This is the only opportunity for the student to share specifically who they are, to show that they belong at the school. They're ready for college life. They are ready and they're able, and they're a machine. They're an empowered woman. They're ready to take on life. They're ready to take on the world. Okay. So I think that it's that important, and you really want to try to do that. A college essay, and listen, and I don't mean, please understand, I'm going to just say this again. Yes, a college essay is not an English essay. Okay. And sometimes I can't tell you how many of my students have come to me and said, no, I'm done with the essay. I'm like, well, what do you mean? We haven't even gone over it yet. No, I got a 94 on mine. I'm like, oh, you did it in English class. Okay, let me see it. No way. We're not using this. I mean, and literally, Debbie, I had a student that got a 94 and she wrote about car sickness. And in the first paragraph, she used the word throw up and vomit 9 times.
Ooh, boy.
Oh, I wanted to throw up. I wanted to throw up reading it, right? That's the last impression. You don't want people thinking, oh, Evelyn is throw up. Like it was terrible. Now, we used the concept, we wrote it, but we wrote it incredibly different. Now, again, I'm not trying to bag English teachers in any way, shape, or form. But a college essay, like I said before, and I actually saw 3 people, at least in what I could see, clapping when I said this. There are no rules. This is a creative writing assignment, okay? You can write it third person. You can use I. You can do it. The only rules that I would follow are the ones that I kind of suggested on don't use dialogue, don't use a quote, don't try to stay away from a cliche topic. But as far as your style, I try to have as much as possible with my students that it's conversational. It's as if you're having a conversation when you're reading this. It can't and shouldn't be too formal. All the formality will be in the supplemental questions of why this school and why do you want to study this and those kind of things. This is an opportunity to have a casual conversation with somebody in writing, and you really need to try to approach it that way to make it fun to read and exciting to read. The tone of the essay is different from supplemental. Like I said, can be fun, could be jovial, could be joking around, could be light, but the supplemental essays are much more brass tacks, get that, depending on the question, of course, but they're more, more closer to what students used to writing in a research paper. Essays are absolutely never a one and done process. Again, usually my process is I have my students write at least twice, all on their own with me giving them feedback, asking what they're thinking about, giving them ideas on how to change things, modify things, not asimilar to what we just did on the sample essays together. And then because I don't want it to become a Russ essay. And I let them do it. And then we get down to a little bit more of the nitty gritty. But at the end of the day, I always say it has to be in their tone, their voice, and they have to be happy with it or they shouldn't be doing it. Essay feedback is subjective, and it's absolutely 100% true. I advise my students to be very careful who they share their essays with. Absolutely, by the way, parents, that's a no-brainer. You're a given, okay? But as far as other people, I tell them to be careful, because even people that have good intentions, they can get 50 different opinions on something. It can confuse the heck out of them. So I always tell them be very specific with who you want to ask, and understand it's not a criticism of you. Take, including my feedback, by the way, take what you like, discard the rest, and just focus and make it a, an aggregate of everything that you think is best. And again, we did already talk about the word limits, but it's unbelievable how many students of mine say, no, it's 2 words over, but the Common App took it. Don't do it. And don't try to do filler. One of the best essays where 6 of her 10 admissions people wrote her a note of how much they loved her essay was one of the shortest essays I've done in 16 years. I think it was only like 368 words or something. And it's supposed to be
368 words, and that was for the main essay?
Yes.
That was a risk.
Yeah, it was, but it was so fun, engaging, and unique, and they loved it. And I still use it now as an example, just to show you don't have to push the limits if you don't want to. So don't have to tell all of you that, writing the essays can be pretty agonizing. And it's, it's the real work part. And that's why most students push it off as long as they possibly can. But the more you get done before school starts, believe me, the better off you're going to be. You don't want to have to manage this. And look, many of us don't even know what school's going to look like this fall. So that's a lot of uncertainty and potential stress as it is. So, whatever your student can do and you can do to help them to get some, as much of this stuff done as possible before school starts, I would actually, try to help them do that. And talking about it, so I think you definitely need to talk. And I know I'm very close with my daughter, who's again a senior. And I know some of you probably are too. And then others of you, you're like, I don't know, he or she won't tell me anything. I always advise my students, no matter what their relationship with their parents, no matter where they are currently in their life, that they should absolutely brainstorm with their parents. And I tell them 80%, by the way, of what your parents give you is going to be garbage. But don't be tough on them. Like, use the 20% that they do give you. But I also tell them, by the way, 80% of what I give you is going to be garbage. Use the 20% that you like. So it's very subjective, but you as parents know your student best. Try to avoid the cliche topics that we've talked about. And I just saw a question there. Humor is great, yeah, provided that it's actually funny. It doesn't have to be falling off your chair kind of thing. You have to make sure that it doesn't cross any political lines or any of those kind of things, politically incorrect statements or any of those kind of things, not making fun of anybody or whatever, but to use light, conversational kind of things, absolutely. I try to use humor all the time I try to envision the admissions person reading my student's essay, or in this case, now my daughter's essay, and going, you know what? this was actually fun to read. If I had 50 of these, I would love my job. Right? So you can definitely do that. So hopefully you're ready. Writing college essays, again, could be very agonizing. I talked about don't wait until school starts. A lot of your students are going to have maybe one, maybe you get lucky and they have the one main essay and that's it. But especially I think in today's, and if you're going to go SAT optional, a lot of times colleges are adding additional questions. So you should probably plan on anywhere between 5 and 20 essays to complete in total. 20 might be a little aggressive for a lot of you, but depending on the competitiveness of schools and the types of schools, you can definitely expect that. In addition, a lot of honors programs require additional essays. Some of them have separate applications, so you should definitely look into that. I have actually had students tell me, I'm like, well, why didn't you click yes to honors? They're like, because I have to do another essay. I'm like, did you tell your parents? Because with honors comes $15,000. I think they'd say, buckle up and write the essay, honey. You know, so honors could be another essay. And by the way, my own daughter made that mistake outside the other day. She's like, oh, honors, I'm not going to do that. I'm like, what? Yes, you are. A lot of students don't know where to start. You know, I don't know if any of you are country music fans. And if for those of you who aren't, hear me out. Blake Shelton, a lot of people probably know him music-wise or otherwise on The Voice, but he told a story a long time ago that I share with my students. He wrote his own music, and he used to write and crumple things up and throw it in the garbage, get really aggravated. He said at least once a night he would storm out of his house, and at the time he was still living with his mother. And he'd be so aggravated he'd go and he had a bat and he used to hit it against a tree. And his mother, unknowing to him, would go up in the room and take every piece of paper and uncrumple it and put it in a folder. And when Blake had his head about him again, she would sit down with him and say, there's got to be something in here that you like. There's got to be, just take a sentence from this and and it's the same thing with writing this essay. Try to have your student not be hard on themselves. Just write. I tell my student, write about anything as long as I don't care about the tone. I don't care about it. Just write. I'll fix it with you later. But just whatever, again, I've said this before, whatever you have to do to get from here to the paper or to and I wrote my whole book on paper first, by the way. That's the kind of person I am. I'm a little traditional that way. I think as I write, and it's just better and it flows easier for me. So some students might like that better. That's fine. Again, don't have to tell you, but the essays are critical, especially now. And again, it is difficult for a student to be willing to listen to feedback. So if you're going to provide it yourself, be careful. Okay. Make sure you couch it with, this is not a criticism of you. Try to be upbeat. Try to tell them all the good things that they did in their essay and just give them some ideas. Try not to react after they leave the room. Then you can yell at your husband or your wife and say, can you believe it? I don't understand why she's not doing it. But at least in front of them, try to keep it, civil, and try to let them know that you're just supporting them. And don't take their sensitivity personally, because again, it's about them, and it's not easy for most students to write.
So Russ, is a good question that we didn't really touch on. I don't know if you can talk a little bit about it, about how you might, can you use the same essay for multiple schools, or how you might be able to take pieces of your essay, and kind of break it apart for different.
Yeah, so that's a great
schools.
question. I mean, to be efficient. So the first thing is, we talked about the one example that we did, right? And I said it was better to be used, a majority of it, for a why this major, like why you want to pursue this career or major, right? So that's why you don't want to write the main essay about that, because when you kind of use all that content for the main essay and then you're asked why this major question, you're like, I don't know, I kind of already said that, and you want to be repetitive. But once you decide, as an example, why this major, yes, if other schools ask it, you can absolutely use the framework and sometimes a lot of the structure of that essay over and over again, but then tweak it and modify it specific to the program offered at that specific school, or an internship kind of thing, or some kind of experience that you've had, or that kind of thing. But absolutely, you don't need to write every essay from scratch. So hopefully all of you feel good about where you are and what you want to do. the thing is that, some of you also though might say, you know what, I don't want to argue with my student about this. I don't really know where to start. I'm not great at writing myself. I don't really have any good ideas. So we did put some together at the request of the people of Road to College and Paying for College 101, to be honest with you, some options for you that are incredibly affordable that we thought we would just share with you. And obviously there's no obligation. We just want to make sure that you have help if you want it.
Let me just say, I know that, and Russ, you probably haven't been able to look at the chat. There's a ton of people who said, what about this topic? What about that topic? It's hard to kind of give like a one sentence response, or even for, Russ to kind of like give a true evaluation, because you need to know a little bit more about the student, or the example that Russ kind of showed with those essays. You need to dig in a little bit more. You can't just like say, should I write about, being the editor-in-chief of the newspaper? Like you need to have like more to the process. So it's not that I ignored and people were asking about all the different topics. I think it's just, you can't get like a 2 or 3 sentences about whether or not you should do that essay.
Yeah, and I also, that's a great point, because we could literally spend all night going through those, and I'm sure people want to start moving on. But the other thing too is, honestly, even the cliche topics, I just gave you an example of a sport essay that actually I just said is cliche topic in general, but I gave you ideas on how we can make it non-cliche. So honestly, any topic that you are thinking about could be something, but it's all about how you write it and what the message is.
So one more thing, actually, before we talk about the different ways that, we've kind of come up with how we can help families and students. Somebody asked, do most students use a professional to assist with the essays? Like, is that necessary?
It's definitely not necessary. It isn't necessary depending on how your student writes. And the other thing too is, it also depends on, the level of sophistication that your student has in writing. I mean, to me, it's interesting, Deb, because to me, for people who are not my one-on-one clients, for the most part, I actually do a lot of just kind of glancing over to make sure they're on the right agenda, they're on the right track, and that there's no big like red flags of the essay kind of thing. Do you need to get professional help? Not necessarily at all. You certainly don't have to spend a ton of money on it, that's for sure. But to get some assistance and guidance, especially if you don't know where to start, you're not sure that your essay or your student's essay is good enough, or if you're applying to very competitive selective schools. And by the way, competitive selective depends upon where it's all relative. I'm not just talking about the top 50 schools in the country. Competitive and selective schools are for every student, depending on what schools they're applying to versus where they are from an academic perspective. So I do think a lot of times, I'm biased, I do think if it's done the right way from a professional, it can help dramatically and tremendously for the application and the student to stand out.
So what we did, and we're going to walk through them, is we also, our goal has always been to provide services that are very reasonable, that you can kind of pick and choose how you want to address this. So kind of as, people were asking, or, Russ was describing, maybe you just need a kickstart, and you just need help figuring out what the topic is, and then you can go off and you're fine, or maybe ideally what you want to write, but you just want to confirm it's the right thing. Maybe you already have a draft. So we've broken these things up so that we can help if you want help, for different parts of this writing process. You don't have to commit to some huge, package.
We've seen, Debbie, in our research, we've seen people charge $10,000 for, I'm like, it blows my mind, but I don't know what they do for 10 grand other than write it for them. But there's no reason to do that.
So we've broken, again, these up kind of like where you are, what you think you need. So brainstorming topics, as you can see, that was actually like a lot of what we discussed tonight. Is this the right topic? What's the right way to approach it? So we have, different options. If you don't know where to start, then this is the option for you. Or maybe you have a list of ideas and you're just not sure which is the right one to hone in on. or maybe in that list, you don't know how to approach it, just like, Russ talked about, there's a cliche topic, but we can talk about, what's the right angle on that cliche topic.
Correct.
So, that's one option if you wanted to just do brainstorming. And these are all listed. If you guys go to Road to College /essay help, you can see all the different options. You can decide, if any of these are appropriate for you. And Russ he's doing this all. So you would be interacting with Russ. He's reading them. He's giving the feedback. So you just got a taste of what it would be like. And then again, another option is we've broken down, maybe you already have your essay, but you want somebody to review the draft and make sure that you have the structure, you have the content there, that you're really displaying and showing, not just telling what you want to come across.
You were listening.
Yes. So that's option B. And we broke it out, again, if you follow me, Road to College, all this stuff, paying college, we're very sensitive to the price of things. So we broke option B and option C out with if you're okay receiving feedback that's just written and a recorded video from Russ, then that's option C. If you want to talk one-on-one, to hear the feedback and have a more interactive session, that's option B. So this is kind of all up to whatever level you want to get involved in. And then for everybody, for somebody who might want a little bit more of everything, we just package that together. So you could start from the brainstorming to the draft, to the reviewing the draft, and to have it reviewed from like a pure grammar and proofreading standpoint.
Yeah, so if I could, I just want to make a couple comments about these services. So first off, aside from being incredibly ridiculously affordable and expensive compared to most, they are, though, on a essay by essay basis, right? So it's really ideally for one essay. But I will tell you, from working together, the feedback that I provide, you will have ideas and understanding of how to approach other essays. So it's not necessarily that, oh my gosh, he said you have 20 essays, I got to do this now, $299 times 20 essays. You would never, ever in a million years have to do that, okay? You would be able to learn as you go. And you'd be able to obviously build, and those of you who know me, which a lot of you know me through the concierge service and other things that I've done with Debbie, believe it or not, I'm not a jerk. I'm not going to hold back on you. Just, I have to be reasonable with respect to time, but I'm happy to answer easy questions. I just gave a whole bunch of stuff away for an hour and a half here. So I'm happy to try to help out. We're not about, nickel and diming people, but we wanted to make sure, we get asked for the past 2 years, Debbie, I can't even tell you how many times, right, that we've been asked about this. And this is the first year we've really decided to do it ourselves, because we found that some other people that, we were thinking about, their prices were just outrageous. So, hopefully we think there's something for everybody here. And at worst case, you try it at $99 and get an idea of what, to get. And if you think it's helpful, awesome. If not, no problem.
I saw a question from Karen about, can the written summary come with the recording of the Zoom call? I think, and maybe if it wasn't set up right, that said properly on the slide, it is, you get the written summary and then you get the recording of the Zoom call.
Yeah, you could definitely request that.
And then this is just really minor, but if anybody wants to just make sure that, all their T's and I's have been, crossed and dotted, if you want somebody to just read it over from a proofreading and typo standpoint and grammar, we've included that.
Right, so we really have soup to nuts as far as the the essay process.
So there's one thing, and Russ and I forgot to put this in on the slides, so we will just say it to you. And let me just also say that this is recorded. People always ask me that. We send out, if you can give us till noon tomorrow so we can download it, put it in the email, that type of stuff. It gets sent out tomorrow, so you can look this over. You can, maybe you watched it, your student didn't watch it, so you'll have access to the recording. We are, for anybody who signs up for any of these essay services, This will be in the essay. I think from now till Sunday, Russ referenced his essay helper, right? Or
Yep, essay helper. Yep.
yeah, we're going to include that as a bonus. Maybe you want to like say a few words about that.
Yeah, so the essay helper has 3 sample essays in it. It also has some of my brainstorming techniques and questions, and it also has some guidelines. So it's not going to necessarily, answer every single question you have, but it's a good thing on how to start and how to get your mind working on some things, and also to give you some examples. Like the Cosmopolitan essay is in there. And by the way, I already know it is 750 words because at the time that she wrote it, the max was 750, not 650. So I am aware of that, but it's one of my favorite essays. And even my daughter said, you have to include your favorite essay. So, because she loved it as well. So it does include some sample essays in there as well.
And let me just say this last thing, and this is truly not for pressure, but this is, as Russ said, Russ and I have been working together for over 2 years. We've done a lot of other things, to help families with the process. This is the first time we are offering the essay services, and Russ is the guy who is going to do it. And so at some point, his time is going to be limited. So, we're going to have to manage that, but at some point we might have to say, it's been filled up. Like he just doesn't have any more hours in the day. So, again, that is not to say that's not as a pressure thing. I'm just kind of giving you the reality of what we might face in a few weeks.
Well, yeah, and that's an excellent point because that's one of the reasons why we started it now, early August versus later, because the closest, obviously, we get to November 1st, which is a lot of early action, early decision days for a lot of people, the less time I'm going to have. After November 15th, I will then be probably more open again, and we can do that again for anybody who's applying regular, early decision 2, any of those kind of things. But that's one of the reasons we're trying to give all of you a jump start, on this when we can still fit it in as from a capacity standpoint. Sure. So thank you, Debbie. I appreciate your sensitivity to that.
Yes, I know. That's what I keep saying to him all the time. You sure you're going to have time for this? You sure going to have time for this?
I want to help, so we're going to try to be there for him.
And the absolute last comment, guys, is I know, again, there were a lot of questions related to the SATs, ACTs, testing, what school to choose, which isn't necessarily, it's not essay related. So just as a heads up, and you'll get an email because you're on the email list, in like 2 weeks, we're going to do a similar session, but talk about all the issues that you need to think of, particularly seniors, kind of as you're going into the home stretch of applications. So we're going to talk about all these other like non-essay issues that you need to be, thinking about and how you would approach them.
Calling it the senior sprint. It's part of the senior sprint.
Yep. So that's it, guys. I hope this was helpful. And
can I just say one other thing?
Yeah.
I've seen a whole bunch of thank yous out there, and I have to tell you, a lot of you might think that that's not important, but that really means a lot to me because obviously Debbie and I are spending an hour and a half of our time, not to mention all the effort we put into preparing this for you. So don't think that that's not appreciated very, very much. So all of you that are taking the time to say thank you, I really, really appreciate that. That means a lot to Debbie and I because it's not what we do it for, but it's nice sprinkles on the cupcake.
Yep. No, it's very nice. Yeah, I feel the same way. I have to say sometimes I get these unsolicited emails back from my weekly newsletters that say, thank you so much. I never thought of this topic, or this was great information. And it is like heartwarming just to hear those comments.
We're mushes and easy to please.
Right.
All right.
Okay, everybody.
Healthy and safe. Okay.
Okay.
Good luck.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.